Welcome to the AI and Faith podcast. We are a community of expert technologists, professionals, and faith leaders bringing the ancient wisdom of the world's major religions to the ethics of artificial intelligence. Join us on this new journey and welcome to the conversation.
My suggestion is that where humans will have comparative advantage, maybe 10 years from now, let's say, are areas where authenticity is either the core of what's being valued or is inextricably mixed with other things, where something is authentic, factual, and ethical, and the authenticity component is essential.
My name is Daniel Heck, and I will be your host for today. A few AI and faith experts gathered together in June of 2024 to talk about how AI will impact work in the future and how faith, jobs, work, and AI ethics intersect. The recording includes Mark Graves, Michael Paulus, Quintin McGrath, Elias Kruger, and myself. I was grateful for the insightful, grounded conversation, and it gave me a lot of hope that we can build a future where we thoughtfully value and cultivate a wide range of human virtues and values, even in the emerging landscape that is created by AI. For my part, I don't assume that this will happen automatically, but I do think that the kind of ethical reflection and discussion that our experts were able to bring to the table can help orient us towards the kinds of processes and goals that we should have.
Maybe we just start with a little bit of introductions and hellos and get into the conversation. I'm the chief AI ethicist for the Understanding Group, which is an information architecture firm out of Ann Arbor. A lot of my focus is on ethical AI management, and so developing AI frameworks and applying them for doing things like helping organizations engage in self-reflection processes about their AI integration, doing some survey instrument design and things like that as well. And I got into this work because I was working for the AFL-CIO about 15 years ago when we were doing long-range planning, and I started reading futurists who were predicting this wave of automation, and I wanted to be working on the ethics and faith side, actually, as this sort of transition came about, because I thought there would be more scope to ask some of the big questions, especially big questions about labor and its integration. So I'm really happy to be a part of this conversation here today. Mark, if you want to go next.
Sure. I've been at AI and faith for a couple of years. I guess specifically with the faith and work. So it's not something that I've thought of as like a category, but it's certainly something I've experienced. This group coming together was just realizing that there are quite a number of people at AI and faith that have interest in faith and work, and have actually been thinking about it, and writing about it.
Michael Paulus, you're the next on my screen.
So Michael Paulus, I'm in the midst of transitioning from Seattle Pacific University, where I'm the dean of the library, to Creighton University, pretty much the same position. Also, my portfolio in the past has included educational technology. Since I took my previous position at SPU about 13 years ago, I've been specifically interested in the intersection of theology and technology. That led to thinking about AI, doing some research on AI. I got specifically interested in work and faith because at SPU, we have an endowed collection that focuses on work and faith. And so working with that collection, working with the donors associated with that collection, papers, books, rare books, and sort of curating that over time, I became really interested in the future of work. And actually, the chapter I wrote in the first book I published does focus on the future of work. And I was involved in organizing a conference for this fall at SPU that focuses on AI and the future of work. And that's led by various faculty members from across the disciplines. So this is a topic that I've been interested in for a while, and I was really excited to see kind of convening a group of people to talk about this.
So Quintin McGrath, I've been, my background, grew up in South Africa. I was with Deloitte for many years and in the industry for many years. And really part of my focus, and then I went and did my doctorate in AI ethics and risk management, a lot driven by my Christian spiritual journey. And so a lot of my life since my doctoral studies, in fact, I retired from Deloitte in 22, I've then been really focused on how do I apply and how do I bring the kingdom into the space of AI, which is just a totally different world with artificial intelligence, human intelligence, how it all binds together, everything that happens at the higher level, our spirituality, social impact and societal impact that goes along with it. And so to me, this is the socio-technical system of artificial intelligence and put the two together.
Elias.
Faith for work was very large. So maybe what I'll do, I'll do a bit of a contrast. So I think right now my work has changed, my faith has changed so much, right? And so I think I moved from work and faith to more like spirituality and connection and accomplishment. So maybe it's three. So now I don't see faith more as this fixed thing. Oh, it's a lot more a fluid it's like in the air, spirituality, right? So it is about, I mean, I hate to say it, but it's like about how I feel in my workday. So being able to sit at a dinner with somebody and hear about their Hindu faith and talk about my Christian faith, that's beautiful. That's human connection.
What I'd like to propose for a structure of the conversation is to take some time and each share, anybody who wants to share their perspective on how rapidly automation is going to be replacing jobs, which I think is sort of the core discussion, so that we can at least know where we're all coming from, and then framing how we're thinking about the relationship between jobs, both like in the workplace, but also jobs as part of the social roles that we perform and the societal transformations that I think are already underway to some degree. Cards on the table. Personally, I am bullish on the ability of AI to automate jobs. I think that this MIT article that I'm just going to share briefly, it's a very quick interview from an MIT analysis, that highlights for me a perspective that's trying to analyze what's going to happen. And they were anticipating, for example, in January of this year, that vision technology would be too expensive to integrate. And so a lot of jobs would be safe because AI can't see. Right, we can't do visual tasks, and then I was like, oh, hold my beer, right? and I think that for me that encapsulates one of the examples of where, in my view, these systems can be more or less factual in their outputs, including like making physical differences in space, and they're rapidly becoming more capable of that. They can be more or less ethical, meaning aligned with the ethos of an organization such as a company, and I think they're often more ethical than people in terms of their outputs alone. We're just talking about that already, and I think they can also be more or less moral. And in my own view, that means aligned with the general characteristics of human moral psychology, although that's perhaps a rather post-Kantian move. People might have more different takes on morality. What I think that we don't see any way of making progress on at this point is what I call the hard problem of authentic communication, which would require first solving the hard problem of consciousness, determining whether a given system is even having experiences of any sort at all. The hard problem of consciousness remains hard to solve, but you would first need to basically know that these systems are having experiences. Then you would have to map the particular nature of those experiences onto communications and then have the communication do that. And I don't see a way forward on that. My suggestion is that where humans will have comparative advantage, maybe 10 years from now, let's say, are areas where authenticity is either the core of what's being valued or is inextricably mixed with other things, where something is authentic, factual, and ethical, and the authenticity component is essential. And I think that what that will be is hard to predict, but the research on, for example, people liking the bedside manner of AIs highlights for me that, I don't go to my doctor to have primarily to have an authentic community, like human connection, or like to find a spouse, right? That's not really what you're doing there. And so if an AI is gentle and respectful, I think a lot of people will prefer it and might even have privacy benefits. That's sort of my own view on why I'm pretty bullish, and my thinking is then more expansive in terms of what kinds of reforms I think we need to have in view. But that's where I'm coming from, and I may well be wrong. So it's very difficult to predict. But I'll just go around, and anybody else wants to share where they're coming from in terms of just what they think the facts of the matter are likely to be over the next, period of time you want to talk about.
A little bit of context from my perspective was, I started my career in the late 80s, just as the last AI winter was starting, and entered the job market after my PhD with a PhD in AI. Basically the year it hit academia. And so I'm very aware of the hype, that I see. Certainly people in computer science and kind of business tech are aware of the cycle and the hype and everything, but this is a time that AI didn't hit society before like it has now. Within the imagination, and we ended up with Terminator movies and things like that, but it didn't hit. There wasn't the same risk, of jobs. And I guess in terms of AI features in general, for me, it's still a little open because I can see a couple of very clear paths. And I just don't think we've come down on one side of it or not. And part of it depends upon kind of the level of hype. Authenticity is, I guess, a good placeholder. There's something there. For me, it's probably more around morality, or underneath that, even social cognition or stuff like that, where, AI, large language models, a single foundation model just does not have that capacity. It can do a lot, but because people are kind of fuzzy about what the capability is, there's this kind of over-promising. And my concern is if there's this over-promising and not delivering, then is that going to actually stifle research that's needed in those areas to actually deliver it? I've still been focused a little bit more on the ethical and philosophical piece, because every time, which I do periodically, I go look at the tools, I'm like, well, yes, if I tried to build something using the tools now, it would take me like months, and by the time I did it part-time, it'd be obsolete. So I'm waiting until it gets to this point where I can like pull together half a dozen packages and be 60% there, and then I'll really try it, build something. But I'm not seeing that trajectory, because it seems like there's been a focus more on scale, not necessarily that kind of leveling up in abilities that would make it easier to build something that would then be a threat for a lot of jobs. I mean, I think there's going to be a big impact. I mean, in part because of the internet, and then, the remote work out of the pandemic. I think we're really well poised for AI to be much more disruptive than it might have been if this were happening kind of in a different social climate. And so, I think it's going to be really disruptive, but I think there's a certain type of position that I don't think it's threatened in the near term, but I'm still open to, even 5 or 10 years, are there threats to that, just depending upon the direction AI goes.
My threshold for when I think it's going to start to be really disruptive is when there's an AI that I can go to that will set up my workflows using the most up-to-date AI systems today for me. So I don't have to try to track where it's at today.
Yeah.
I think in this conversation, augmentation is really the key here, and the idea that replacement is a problem, but I think it's less about jobs, but tasks, right, being replaced. And that eventually does lead into less jobs. You've got big tech laying off people last year. Now you have, I know all the banks are laying off people. And it's like, there's no financial reason. Like, their financials look fine. They're doing that because they know, or they're counting on being able to do more with less people. I don't want to dismissify and say there's not going to be lots of jobs. But then let's talk about augmentation, right? So if we move towards that, a good example in my own view is like, I'm not a great writer, but I enjoy writing, and that's a kind of a bit of a passion of mine. And now, because of the augmentation of some large language models, I'm able to deliver on kind of stories a lot faster. All of a sudden, I can keep a job and then write stories a lot faster. Now, that opens some opportunities. Now, in short, I can do a lot more with my time because of AI, and others will. The people that experiment and learn how to work with AI will take the cream of the cake. I think they will be the ones that will do best, because they will be able to do more. They will be able to advance their careers. And I think it's a really good thing, except when we think about democratization and equity. What is that going to look like for overall society? So you're going to have these super workers who can do so much, and then you have a whole class of people that can't do much because they haven't upgraded themselves. I think, to me, those are, again, the challenge and high level challenge and opportunities with augmentation.
I guess I might be contrarian. I actually think, going back on the previous, and by the way, I like the task thinking as well, by the way, so I think that's good thinking. If I go back to the previous industrial revolutions, we've seen kind of this happen before. There's significant job loss, and a lot of times people focus on, we're losing jobs, but then there's a whole lot of job creation. And if I go to the World Economic Forum, their future of jobs report in 2023, which is dated significantly now because of the changes, but they were talking about 23% of jobs being impacted. I'd say it's probably closer to 70 to 80% of jobs being impacted in some way or other. I would also say that if we take a look at the jobs, we're going to be losing some jobs for sure, but we're going to be creating new jobs for sure. And the whole creation of the new jobs, and I think Elias goes to, there are certainly going to be tasks that people are going to take on, more tasks, I can do tasks differently. So that's the one area. So So if I just look at kind of the total sum of activities and the activities lost or jobs lost and jobs gained, I think that the net sum will probably be about the same, but the type of job is going to be significantly different. And that's where kind of we need to be looking at. And I like your thinking as well in terms of the impact on the society and the leveraging and the way things change over time that I think is going to be important to consider. That's the one element. The other element is if you take a look at, and I don't know how many of you know David Espindola's book Soulful, where he's done essentially analysis of the impact of AI and moving people to the higher levels in essentially the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the self-actualization and realization levels, and being able to operate at the much higher levels because a lot of the basic tasks are done and are more effectively done by computers. And in fact, my perspective is AI is going to eventually say to us, just go away, you are slowing things down. Take your universal basic income and go and sit at home and enjoy yourself. So I think there's going to be some level of that. But I do think there is the movement to the high level and therefore realizing what soulful is all about. And that speaks beautifully into the spiritual space in my mind, is that we can really start being much more holistic people, thinking about others, about relationships, about accomplishment, but much more at the holistic level of accomplishment. And that to me is where things are going to go. I do think that there is a little bit of the fear being created that is similar to kind of what's happened in what we've seen in the previous industrial revolutions. And part of what I think we need to be talking about is how do we translate that into more optimism in terms of what can be, and also not just in number, but also in kind of level and the way human can be more human and we can be more spiritual beings, etc.
I think automation is going to be both abrupt and subtle. My neighbor in Seattle works for Google, a software engineer, and he is terrified he's going to lose his job because he's watching all his colleagues lose their job as Google is developing its own internal AI systems and essentially letting go computer scientists. And he doesn't think he'll have a job in 5 years because he sort of sees, what happens when you have people as fungible assets. On the other end, my wife, she works as a business analyst, so she's works with tech a lot, but she's just been playing with, the various Copilot functionality built into the Microsoft suite. And she's just sort of learning how to do her work more efficiently, automate a lot of the tasks that she does, synthesize information and so forth. And then in the middle, so, my profession is all about information. And we are going to see, all of you are going to be impacted by sort of the changes that we're making in terms of how you discover information, how you interact with information, how you use information. And so my profession, fortunately, is very forward-looking. We've always had this balance between sort of technological advance as well as sort of focusing on what the human contribution is in sort of, helping people engage with information. I was just appointed to a national task force looking at AI competencies for librarians. And we're doing this proactively because we realize that a lot of the work that we do and that our systems do and our structures make our structures work. And we've been automating stuff for decades. So we'll continue to automate more, but it's just much more sophisticated. We have to sort of understand how to design these systems proactively so that they do attend to certain ethical issues, that they are accurate and trustworthy. But at the same time, we need to cultivate new human practices that parallel these so that we're sort of, in the loop is what people like to talk about. But there've always been, sort of working with technology, there's sort of the human formative practices that we have alongside the material technologies we use. And so as we design new systems, automate more things, we have to really rethink what we actually do as human work and what human work is important. And this is where I think we get into the really interesting ethical, moral, and virtue questions, because the work we do depends on certain virtues, and doing that work cultivates those virtues. So if we automate all our work, how are we cultivating virtues? Things that might be important to us, like endurance or truth, or sort of a deeper understanding and sort of engagement with the world. I do think that there is a huge opportunity here to think about not just how we design ethical systems, but how we cultivate our ethical, moral behaviors as people shaping this technology and understanding how it's shaping us. I appreciate the comparison to the Industrial Revolution, but I think if you look at the third Industrial Revolution, you'll see we really missed the mark. A lot of jobs were lost. So I just moved from Seattle, which, is one of the cities of the 21st century, to a city that was kind of more of a city of the 20th century, right? Omaha. So you look at what's happened in the Midwest in the United States, essentially a generation of people have been displaced by automation, and the jobs that were available after that weren't as good of the jobs as the automated jobs that were lost. With AI, I think we're going to see greater disruption and displacement, but I do think there is an opportunity for us to be much more proactive in sort of helping people, not just upskill or sort of adapt, but to really think deeply about what work is and why it's important and how it forms us. And I do think on the optimistic side that we can actually create better forms of work, but better forms of engaging in the world that is a more holistic engagement of our beliefs and values. So the initial question was, are you bullish? I am both hopeful, but a little fearful too about what's happening. I am encouraged by those of us who are trying to be proactive and thoughtful about what's happening, but we don't want to be too optimistic and say, this will all sort out. And we don't want to be too fearful saying we're doomed. I think we have to have a kind of a realistic, hopeful approach to this.
And Michael, I just want to pull on one thread that you said there. Is like you said something, the technology that we use forms us in a certain way. So it's almost like we're so worried about how technology is changing, but are we paying enough attention into how technology is forming us and making us different human beings? The whole idea of spiritual formation, this at a lower level, I can think about even in the role of the writer. As you start getting more engaged in AI, your role as a writer becomes more of an editor. So instead of striving to be a good writer, now you have to strive to be a really good editor. You need to be able to read, pinpoint what needs to be improved or not, right? So that's a different kind of skill, and that's a different kind of thinking, and that's a different kind of person that you kind of need to become. And yeah, maybe before you would have an editor and a writer, right? So, but that's just one small example.
I think I have a colleague who directs the writing program at SPU, and he's really rethinking what it is to write, because he's been leading the evolution of our writing program for a number of years, thinking about less writing as just sort of this product, this thing you produce, but the process you engage in as you write. And so when ChatGPT was released, he was one of the first people we started having pretty intense conversations with about how are you going to bring this into your curriculum, in your sort of teaching and learning. And he was ready because he had a framework that sort of was rethinking what writing is as a process and the different things that feed into that. And so, an AI assistant is just sort of can be integrated into that process and thinking about what, how you're using it, what are its capabilities and limitations. So you're right. I mean, it is what a writer is shifting. But again, that needs to be something we really spend a lot of time thinking about, especially as we work with our students, teaching them how to write. What is creation? What is the process of creation that we would typically call, that we currently call writing? And then what does that look like if AI is part of that? So yeah, you're right. We're going to reframe a lot of these roles.
My closing thought on all of this is that it's remarkable that the costs, including on Anthropic's new system, are consistently dropping by a factor of 10 each time. And that does suggest that perhaps the world where, Elias, you're gesturing towards, where actually it gets a lot easier to make your own bottom-up language model, is like, oh, well, now it only costs $1 million in a couple of years. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. So grateful I could, and I would love to continue this conversation.
Thanks, everybody. Great conversation.
Thank you. Let's go to. Thank you much.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. Stay tuned to listen to more recordings and interviews with experts from around the world. In the meantime, follow and rate our podcast on your favorite podcast platform and share with your friends. Don't forget to follow us on our social media as well. We're on LinkedIn and X. Thank you for joining us today.